All right, in this week's edition of CRT This Week, we're going to talk about three separate events that happened recently in the last week or so. The first is the Microsoft videos that are, what do we call them, identity videos? This is something very concerning. It's something you're going to see happening more and more at your work. It's going to happen in communication, media, etc., over and over again, and it's going to probably come to your ward soon. We'll get to that in a minute. Secondly, we're going to talk about Nicole Hannah Jones and a tweet she put out talking about collectivism. We need to understand with critical race theory that there's some pushback or some distancing sometimes saying you're not a racist. It's just your group is a racist, or there is just systemic racism. I'm going to show you what the difference is and how that just doesn't work with critical race theory. Ultimately, you are a racist. And third, Juan Williams of Fox News does something that to me is, I don't know how else to put it. It's despicable and very concerning as he starts talking about, again, our schools and our children inserting race as a leverage against parents. Very concerning. So first, let's go over to the Microsoft videos.
Hello and welcome to Microsoft Ignite. We've got a big day ahead and lots in store for you. First, we want to acknowledge that the land where the Microsoft campus is situated was traditionally occupied by the Sammamish, the Duwamish, the Snoqualmie, the Suquamish, the Muckleshoot, the Snohomish, the Tulalip, and other Coast Salish peoples since time immemorial. A people that are still here, continuing to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. My name is Allison Wines. I'm a senior program manager in our developer tools division. I'm an Asian and white female with dark brown hair wearing a red sleeveless top.
And I'm Seth Juarez, program manager in the AI platform group. I'm a tall Hispanic male wearing a blue shirt, khaki pants. Today we kick off 2 days of learning more about the latest solution.
Okay. So this is the idea. You know, we've heard the pronouns oftentimes, right? His, her, his, him, her, hers, etc. Them, they. This goes even beyond that. It's starting to talk about a description. Let me tell you who I am. If you're blind, I can tell you exactly what I'm wearing. If you're colorblind, I can tell you what I'm wearing and what color it is. I'm going to identify myself with my pronouns. I don't think they did that here. I'm not sure. But then they can identify who they are, what their sexuality is, what their gender is, what their ethnicity is. This is going to start happening at your work if you haven't seen it already. This is Microsoft. This isn't something that's just happening in Silicon Valley. We have reports of this all over the place. I have reports of this happening at church. Testimony meeting, pronouns going out at testimony meeting. And these are individuals that are not marginalized, right? This is white women, for example, heterosexual white women and men that are putting this out there at testimony meeting. And it's all coming to the church. Again, that is my biggest concern here. Now look at this second video that Microsoft put out, something very similar.
Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Gadilla. I'm a Caucasian woman with long blonde hair, and I go by she, her. I'm a product marketing lead here at Microsoft and co-host of the podcast Security Unlocked with this guy.
Yes, that would be me. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Fillingham. I'm a Caucasian man with glasses and a beard. I go by he, him, and I'm a security evangelist here at Microsoft.
Okay. Now, again, imagine what this does. You think somehow this is some kind of, hey, let me tell you about my background. Let me identify who I am. There is no doubt that what we're getting is a watering down, right? A muddying of the waters of identity with each individual. They think they're strengthening it. Critical race theory, the identitarians, believe that they are strengthening the identities. They're not. What they are doing is they're removing the primary identity of being a son or a daughter of God. Remember, the church does an amazing job of this. They really do. They really push that and make sure that that is, even at BYU, with at least the written documentation that they've approved, the administration has really focused on making sure that at the top, whenever they talk about LGBTQ issues or other identity issues, they start off with the focus and the primary value being that we are children of God. As we encircle ourselves, as we intensify other identities, we lose that larger identity, the true identity that each of us has. We draw attention away from it. We remove power from it. And we divide. Now we're starting to look at everybody as a specific group, announcing your ethnicity, announcing your sexuality, announcing your gender. This is not going to lead to a good place. There will be additional items that are going to be added on to that. It does not stop. Identity becomes more and more watered down. As others believe that they are strengthening it, they are watering down the identities, and they are creating ites amongst us. It is the exact opposite of an assimilation, not to whiteness, for example, but to liberal democracy, to family, to a gender, to a country, right? We don't believe in strong nationalism in the church, but we do believe in loyalty. We do believe in, you have to have a culture. And the more you can strip away from that, especially one that is built on liberal democracy, freedom, liberty, the ideas of the Enlightenment, the ideas of the founding of America, that is all being pulled away from. So you need to attach those things together, right? The identities that are being thrown in here means what they're doing is they're removing themselves further and further from the idea of Martin Luther King Jr., who focused on being an American and the American values of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. There's an assimilation to this. Ibram Kendi pulls away. He calls assimilation, especially to liberal democracy. Ibram Kendi, and critical race theorists, the crits, they call that racism. They call it whiteness. And they've become very good at attaching things such as liberal democracy to the color of a skin, to whiteness, or to any kind of many of the American ideals that were built by Europeans that came over, but they call them whiteness. And so if you can make whiteness a pejorative, everything that was built by whiteness, everything you can assign to whiteness, such as the Constitution, such as the Declaration of Independence, now becomes a part of that pejorative. It now becomes a part of what is trying to be pulled down. Now it becomes a part of systemic racism. Remember, there are not just systems in place here in the U.S. that the critical race theorists and anti-racists want to pull down, right? The systemic racism to them is liberal democracy, is the founding of America. And this identitarianism, when it enters into the church, is going to be very difficult to combat. All right, secondly, I want to talk about Nicole Hannah Jones, who is the author of the project, the 1619 Project, right? The one that wants to remove the founding of America and make the founding of America in 1619 instead of 1776. And this is how you fight this, right? You need to understand that this is all political underneath here. It's a political chassis that is moving the vehicle forward. It's not race. It's not sexuality. It's not ethnicity. If you don't understand that, then you will always get caught up in those arguments. It is political. So here's what she tweeted out. She says, the desire for so many Americans to be free of collective shame, right? You are not an individual. Collective atonement and collective responsibility for the shameful legacy of centuries of slavery racism, apartheid, and terroristic violence visited upon fellow citizens is the sign of an immature and selfish culture. Look, there's a big difference between recognizing what has happened in the past in the United States and understanding the flaws. It's completely different to make a 5-year-old kid or a 50-year-old man or woman guilty, shameful, because of what happened a couple hundred years ago, 400 years ago, right? It's truly putting the sins of the original sin of Adam and Eve down to everybody here in the United States today, everyone who's white, according to Nicole Hannah Jones. This idea of this collective shame is the same thing that is rooted in intersectionality and critical race theory. You are part of a group, and all of the characteristics of that group, like I was saying previously about whiteness or blackness or Latino, not Latinx, Latino, or whatever it might be, Asian, etc., you are immediately ascribed those characteristics. So all they have to do is define each collective group, and understanding that you are a part of that. Now you collect all of the shame or benefits or privileges or victimhood of each one of those groups. What does that do for all of us in society? It all of a sudden says, look, I'm going to start moving, if I can, to another group. Because if I can focus in that direction more, then you end up with greater privilege. You end up with a greater victimhood privilege on the totem pole of intersectionality. The additional point to make on this is that, as you see here again, to be free of collective shame, right? What this is it's removing individuality. And this is a crucial part of kind of the two-faced game that critical race theory plays. One is they're going to tell you that critical race theory is not about your individual racism, right? It's about systemic racism. It's these systems that are in place, which ultimately means liberal democracy, freedom. But that's never true, because you get the same thing on the other end here that comes back and says, no, actually, because even though you're an individual, you're actually part of this collective group. And this collective group is responsible for X, Y, Z, and has these traits and this guilt and this shame. Therefore, you are a part of that, and you as an individual participate in all of those pejorative, shameful stigmas that go along with it. So when you hear that argument, and you will, that it's not about you as an individual, it's absolutely about you. You can't have a collective group without individuals. And you can't have systems that are attributed to certain groups and not have people participate in those groups. It doesn't work both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. That's what they want. Now, lastly, I want to cover what Juan Williams wrote that was picked up at least for The Hill, the political online magazine The Hill. And this is, to me, the most egregious of all three of these examples, and something to really watch out for. Here is the title of his piece. It is Juan Williams, Parents' Rights is Code for White Race Politics. That is disgusting, right? In other words, he is associating white supremacy to a parent standing up for their child against pernicious political ideologies like critical race theory and anti-racism. That's what he's doing. He's trying to put a wedge of race between the parents and the children. If you do not believe in critical race theory, which is to them the only way of creating better race relations or creating some type of justice, then you are a part of the problem. Then you are tied to white supremacy. Then you are tied as a parent who is watching out for their kids. You are tied somehow to racism. That's what he's saying. It's disgusting. It is disgusting. It is a wedge between parents and children. Here's what Juan Williams says further down in his article. He says, unlike their earlier defense of who's there? Who are they? Unlike their earlier defense of Confederate monuments, the parents, quotation marks, the parents' rights campaign message at first looks to have zero to do with race. It has to do with politics, Juan, your politics. And he confirms what Terry McAuliffe, this is all built around the Virginia governor's race, what Terry McAuliffe called the Republican message of a racist dog whistle. In other words, again, if you fight against critical race theory, if you fight against anti-racism, if you fight against division and the pulling down of liberal democracy, then it's a dog whistle. It's a race dog whistle. Don't let them do this. This is why you have to understand it's political. It is political. Keep your eye on that ball. You have to see that there are two levels. Go to the underlying level of politics. What are you really fighting for? The politics. What are you fighting for? The ideas of the founding of America. What are you fighting for? Liberty, freedom, democracy. That's what this is about. If you don't see that, you're going to lose. Lastly, and I'm certainly not part of the far right here, but this is what he says to finish off the article. Polls show that the big money coming from the right has resulted in the parents' rights movement gaining traction among white voters. Well, I wonder why. But this movement is not about parents. Look how he's trying to put this in place here. He's trying to say it's about racism. It's not about you worrying about your kid. Those parents are just racists. That's what he's saying. This movement is not about parents. It's about exciting the far-right base by stirring up racial division. As if critical race theory and anti-racism read the curriculum in these K-12 schools that's coming out. It's unbelievably divisive. And more important, it is unbelievably political. Keep that in mind. I am going to hammer that point in these episodes. This is political. It's a pernicious political ideology. That's the issue.